Compared to my scientific colleagues here, I'm not going to give a very scientific presentation because that is not my field of expertise. What I'm going to show is the work that we've been doing at the foundation in the last few years, and this is a work that actually involves a lot of people. So it's been a wide team working, and many people from different fields, different approaches, and I'll try to convey the idea that in the foundation at ICES we've had about how to develop safer practices, how to advance towards safer practices in the ayahuasca world. This that you see here is the draft of a safe practice guide that the Catalan Health Department, the public Catalan agency for health, is going to publish in the next weeks or months. So that's going to come from the official health department in Catalonia. What are safe practices regarding ayahuasca? So it's like the government becoming involved in these practices. And how we got here, it's a history that it's interesting in my opinion. So I'm going to tell you some of the events that happened throughout this history to see how we have get to this point. So when I started working with ICES, it was in 2010. And one of the first events that I saw and I attended to was a 2-day conference that happened actually already in the Catalan Health Department in Barcelona. Those conferences were 2 days in which the therapeutic potential of the iboga alkaloids were discussed. So many people that had been working in the field of iboga came there and presented some of the ideas, the research that they had done. And that was quite an event in Barcelona, like talking about this strange substance and the public health system getting involved in at least hosting that event in their premises was something that was actually very successful. We had good speakers, Giorgio Samorini and some others were there, so it was like a first and powerful event. Then I got more involved in the work at ICES, and my role there was always to support people that would contact us with some specific requests. And since I am a psychologist, my role there has always been to answer the emails and the questions of people that they were having some kind of issue regarding, should I drink ayahuasca, where should I go to drink ayahuasca, or I've had a problem after an ayahuasca experience, or I've taken this medication and this and that, I'm having questions about if I should or I should not take ayahuasca. So little by little we started having lots of emails coming, and I was answering those emails, and we realized that there were some topics that they were common in the things that people were asking us. One of the things that people wanted to know the most, this was back in 2011, is where do I go to drink ayahuasca? If I want to have the experience, where do I have to go? So our policy has always been not to recommend anyone, or not to say go to this shaman or this center or this other place, but we thought that it was important to in a way educate people so they could take informed decisions. They could choose what center, what kind of shaman, what approach was good for them, because we know that the ayahuasca world is very, very diverse. There's many different practices, and some of them might be more suitable for certain kind of people. So one of the things that we decided to do then was to create this file here. This is only in English, well, it's in English and Spanish. You can find it online as well. So this was the first ayahuasca good practice guide. We wrote this back in 2013, so it's a long time ago that we wrote this. And here we tried to bring the idea that an ayahuasca session is not a single event, it's an event that happens in a chain of events. So there's the preparation that's important, and there's the integration that is also important. And for us, this idea was, what would look like a safe practice regarding ayahuasca? So then with the team, and we started writing what we thought would be good practices regarding ayahuasca. And we came to this document that it was, in a way, very influenced by my training in psychology, in transpersonal psychology and holotropic breathwork under the Stan Grof's model. So it was very much influenced by this. This is online, you can access this. And we even provided like questionnaires and information that could be provided for people so they would have an idea of what ayahuasca is. As you can see, it's a quite complete document. there was even a medical form, a proposed medical form for how can you screen someone to check if ayahuasca would be safe for this person or not. So this was a first idea that we had. This went online, and I have to say that it didn't get much attention. It has remained there since 2013. But this, when we created this, in a way we were thinking of what are the like a good way to do this or a safe way to do this. But we ended up seeing that this was a good document to educate people. So people would say, where do I go to drink ayahuasca? We would say, I'm not going to tell you where you have to go, but I'm going to tell you some of the criteria that might be useful for you to think about before going somewhere to drink ayahuasca. So this was happening over a period of time. We were sharing this file, and all the way until 2017, we got a grant from an European project. And in this grant, it was about it was a co-joint project between different NGOs in different places in Europe. And in our part was a harm reduction project, but regarding psychoactive ethnobotanicals, or plants that have been traditionally used, and that the European Union now understands as new psychoactive substances. So it's like this is something new. They were not aware of that this was happening, but it's actually not new psychoactive substances. They are actually very ancient. They are ancestral psychoactive substances. So this was a very important project for us because we got funding from the EU, and what they asked us is to build some platform in which we could inform people and we could also support people. So in this platform, we shared some information about several plants, and we wrote some reports. They can be downloaded. I don't know. We can go to any of the reports. And so there's a part that it's information, basically about different ethnobotanicals, and there was also a part of this project that was a survey. Yeah? Have you ever used psychoactive plants or fungi? So we wanted also to conduct a research to understand a little bit how is the phenomenon of the use of botanical tools in the West, no? in Europe and North America, mostly Europe. So one of the things that we try to do is to try to see what is the profile of the person that uses this kind of substances. So we created a survey, and like 500 people, something like that, answered that survey. This ended up being, no, it's not here, sorry. It's an article that we co-wrote with my friend Janice here in the room. He did most of the writing, actually, so the credit should go to him, really. So this was something that was also a nice outcome. We had this research, like qualitative research of how do people use these substances and how do they perceive that the use of these substances, plants, animals, and fungi affect them. Yeah, I'm not going to get into the results, but it gave us an idea of what are the main plants that are used nowadays. We see that there's a big boom of the use of botanical tools, and we saw some of the patterns that people have in using these plants, which ones are the most prominent, which, as you can imagine, ayahuasca was one of the main ones, mushrooms also one of the main ones. Rapé was one that appeared surprisingly, no, for the traditional kind of understanding of the use of these substances. Rapé is a substance that has increased a lot over the last years. And we also saw that different substances, we knew that already as a community, I mean, but we could see that, for example, the use of ayahuasca is very much associated with a ritual context, whether it's shamanic or in a ayahuasca church or in a neo-shamanic context, while the use of mushrooms, for example, tends to be more recreational, although there's people that use them also in ritual use. And then you have substances or plants that people use several times in their life, like ayahuasca. Most people use between 5, 10, 15 times. And then you have other plants that people tend to use once or twice in their life, such as Salvia divinorum, although a lot of people have also tried Salvia divinorum. So it was interesting to see not only how many people try these substances, but what are the patterns of using these substances. Yeah? And this, at the end of this project, we did a conference in the public health department in Catalonia. This was the program, and we presented the results of this survey and the project, and we had also Giorgio Samorini coming and presenting about the ethnobotanical tool. So again, in the Catalan Health Department, they were open to host this event and to promote that from the health department in Catalonia. Now, the Spanish drug regulation is interesting. It's in a way similar to what happens in Portugal, in which the use of substances is not illegal. So it is not a crime to use drugs. If you use them for your personal use, you can get a fine, but it's not a crime, okay? Although the possession of drugs and the trading of drugs, that it is a crime. Then what that has allowed is that many, there's been NGOs that they have worked actively in the risk and harm reduction. For example, the analyzing of drugs has been legal in Spain, and especially in Catalonia, there's been a lot of activity around that. There's this NGO called Energy Control that for many years they've been educating drug users. They've been testing drugs so people could know what is in the pill that I'm taking, how many micrograms of LSD has this blotter. They've been actively educating the community and doing on-site testing. So this has allowed, at least in our country, to develop this kind of practices, these harm reduction approaches that in a way allow us to have a wider impact, because this first good practice guide, this is buried on the internet, so this has no really outcome, people don't see that, and we realized that through this multidisciplinary approach, so legal, therapeutic, policy making, we could have a wider impact. And now the Catalan government is actually going to promote this guide. So this doesn't come from a private NGO; it comes from the public health department. So we believe that this is a way that we can advance more in safer practices. The good thing or one of the interesting things is that when we created the first draft, it was very much self-created thing. That was our view, our values, the thing that we thought it should be. But throughout the years, we started doing meetings with people that offer the medicine, people that work in the community, people that have had problems with ayahuasca. And we started having a wider perspective of how are people working, what are their needs, what are the challenges that they find. So in this next version that we created, it says it's a guide for those that organize sessions, but also for those that participate in sessions. So in a way, it's safer practices for both if you're an organizer and if you're a participant. And we try to include the perspective of everyone that we spoke about. So it's not our view on how things should be done, but it's an integration of the things that we've learned over time. And I think that's what I wanted to tell you today. So thank you very much.
Unfortunately, it seems like Simon, who would be our last speaker, is not present today. So before we get into the questions, I want to make an announcement. It has come to our attention that a company is giving flyers and announcing ayahuasca ceremonies around the conference grounds. We recommend you to not assist these ceremonies. The company has no link with ICERS whatsoever or its philosophy. Okay, so if you have questions, you can address any speaker of the board. Nobody? Okay. So I think that's it for this. Over there? Oh.
I was just wondering if the guide is available in English as well as Spanish, and if it's available to download, if you have paper copies, if we can see this whilst here. Is the safety guide available in English as well as Spanish? And is it available to download, or do you have paper copies that we could see whilst here?
It's available. It's available for download. Unfortunately, the link is not very easy to, but if you look for Ayahuasca Good Practice Guide iShares, that's the first thing that pops up. And it's both in English and Spanish, and you can download the PDF. That's the older version, the 2013 version. This one is still a draft. It's only my computer it's not out there yet.
So it's coming, kind of.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, we have a question over here. And over there.
What would be your recommendation for people who want to get involved with research that are from psychology or psychotherapy and would like to participate?
The sound is not very good up here.
What would be your recommendation for people that want to contribute and participate in research or be part of research?
You mean to be involved as a researcher or to start researching?
Yeah, be involved as a researcher.
You need to have a research interest that's a little bit more specific than just ayahuasca, I would say. A research group that can probably direct you on a method or theory approach that you identify yourself with. Of course, going through an academic path is also always a good idea, because that way you could be contributing to science in a more structured way. So also a possibility, and a common one, is that you find a program, for example, a PhD program with a tutor that has a good understanding of this field, and also the scientific tools in terms of methodology and theory that will help you develop your work. So I think that would be my recommendation.
I have a question.
Oh, no. Go.
About working outside of the window of tolerance. That in your talk, it's kind of two-part. The first part is, what do you do as far as integration when people do have these experiences outside of the window of tolerance? And the second part is, I imagine there's also many people that have experiences in medicine sessions outside of the window of tolerance that then don't go to therapy. I'm wondering about like developing more of a net for the people who don't know how to reach out or have access to therapy.
When I work with trauma, I use a method that's called brain spotting. It's very similar to EMDR. It actually helps you go to deeper levels of the brain, so to lower parts of the brain where the response to a trauma is actually stored. So I use basic principles of trauma therapy when people come after the hard sessions with psychedelics. Sometimes the session opens up an old trauma and it's here. So it's very obvious, just you have to work as a therapist to help the person to reprocess this trauma that was opening up. Sometimes it's not that clear, because the experiences in altered states of consciousness can be more dreamy or more not so clear that some traumatic event happened in the past, but usually people come there. So I think it's very, and sometimes the experience itself is traumatizing. So, but I haven't worked with people who had this experience with ayahuasca. I've worked with some people who had experiences with LSD or mushrooms taken in an inappropriate context and finding the experience really re-traumatizing, and then experiencing dissociation, derealization, depersonalization. So they were having difficulties coming back into these realities because the experience on the other side was so strong and so long, because when people experience these bad trips, In our view of time, it can last for 2 hours, but in their view of time, it can last for eternity. So for their brain, it's an eternity of suffering, of torture, and it's real for their brain. So sometimes also these experiences can be traumatizing by itself. So basically, I use principles of trauma therapy. With brain spotting, you can do a really nice technique of going into the trauma, so the traumatic experience coming up and the memories in a bodily sense, in the emotional sense, everything coming up, and then using a resource spot or a resource to regulate. So as soon as you go in, and as soon as you see a person dissociating or self-report or a person self-reports that it's too much, you go to a spot that can regulate him and then go back again. So it's a very nice and useful technique for trauma therapy, and I use this a lot because this is the technique that I'm trained in. But I think that in integrating or in a therapy of these experiences, when people come with a very open process, it's really useful for a therapist to be familiar with the techniques that go deep. So it can be holotropic breathwork, EMDR, somatic experiencing, brain spotting, as I said. So it's the talk therapy doesn't really do the trick because it just goes to the neurocortical part of the brain, and we know that trauma is stored below. So you have to reach below, and you have to be patient because sometimes it really can go quickly. The person can come out of the experience in 1 or 2 therapy sessions, and sometimes it can go on for a long time. And in my experience, the longer the time goes from the psychedelic experience till the person comes to therapy, the difficult it is, because if the person have a booming experience and then comes to therapy in a month or something, it's much easier to work on that. But if they come after a year or 2 and a lot of other traumatic stuff comes on top of that, it's much more difficult, and it takes a longer time to work through it. And I agree with you that there should be, that a lot of people don't come to therapy. I think there should be, some of the things that is important is that more and more therapists that are involved also in altered states of consciousness can do therapy on that and say that they work on this. And the other thing is that I think it's very important to develop some network, a peer support network, or like Stanislav Grof and his wife established spiritual emergency network. I think it's very important because some of the people go into very deep spiritual emergencies. If they go to psychiatrists, they can get psychiatric diagnosis of being psychotic, but it's just, the traumatic. They need a strong support system to reprocess this, and it's not easy. It's not easy to support a person in a heavy spiritual emergency. You need a lot of people, you need a good network, good organization, a lot of trust. So I think it's an important thing to do. Also, we also try to do this. We collaborate with the Hearing Voices network that is quite active in Slovenia. So we try to also to engage the voice hearers or the people who had experience with extreme states of consciousness to support the people undergoing also, some spiritual crisis after a difficult psychedelic experience.
We have a question there. Yeah.
Hi.
Oh.
I wanted to ask if, I read the before protocols ICERS did about good practice, and this new one, I wanted to know if is any gender perspective included in this guide?
Most of the content is the same, and it's been reorganized in a different way to make it easier to read and more accessible. But we have also included the learnings that we had through meeting with people that offer ceremonies and listening to what are they already doing, what challenges they're encountering, what they consider that there are some of the needs that they would need to improve, or things that they should learn to do in a different way, or where they are finding difficulty. So we've tried to incorporate as well that perspective. It's, as I said, it's an easier to read version because it's going to be like public, so it's not such a technical document, but yeah, we have incorporated this new perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There's another question over there.
Yeah, my question is to Ms. Murphy-Beiner. I'm curious about, you were talking about that mindfulness increases and the cognitive flexibility as well in the afterglow after drinking ayahuasca. But I was wondering whether it also works the other way around, whether, for instance, through mindfulness and through, for instance, meditation, you can increase your cognitive flexibility.
So, yes, there are some overlap of the constructs, and I'm not an expert on that, so there is definitely overlap, and I think it's not quite clear how mindfulness and cognitive flexibility interact themselves as two separate constructs. Are you talking about through meditation practice, for example? Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely some. I mean, some things I've read have talked about cognitive flexibility, kind of mediating the changes that happen through mindfulness increases. So maybe you know. Do you know any more than that? Yeah, that's as much as I know. I hope that helps.
Hello. I would like to have, if possible, the contact of the two therapy centers, the one in UK of Anja and the other one in Slovenia of Mina, and also understanding how you carry on the healing therapy. I mean, it's something like a retreat, or we need to move there if you want to do something with you. I mean, for a person not living in UK, neither in Slovenia. Is it possible to do something with you?
Combining the ayahuasca session and therapy? No, unfortunately not, because ayahuasca is not legal. I mean, it's in a gray field. So we don't have a retreat or whatever. We just have a therapy room for doing therapy. So maybe we can meet afterwards, and I will explain it a little more. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Amaru. This is towards ICers, but also to all the panelists. Thank you to the 6 beautiful panelists. And you presented valuable information, and many of us were taking snapshots of different screens you have up there. I was wondering if there's any way that you can make your presentations available on maybe ICER's platform for the participants, because there's tremendous valuable information in all your presentations to be able to take home and integrate into our practices. So that's the first question.
You're talking about these presentations?
Yeah, your presentations, yes, today.
Yeah, well, this was a very atypical presentation. I was just showing some files, but they are all available on the internet. So this good practice guide can be downloaded and read and printed, so it's public. You can access that. This new guide is not yet published, but when it is, it's going to be public as well. And what else have I presented? Yeah, these research studies, they can be accessed through research platforms online, so PubMed or ResearchGate. They can also be accessed, and we're happy to share it with you. And I don't know if you want anything else in particular. You mean like yesterday?
Yeah, like today. Sorry. So each panelist today presented. Okay. They're literally their screens from your talks, your slides. Sorry. Thank you.
If you want,
your slides.
I'm not sure what the policy will be in terms of the presentations, but give me your email and I'll send it.
Thank you. That's an easy way. Okay. All right.
Yes.
Oh, they are. So will they be made available to us?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Exactly.
Okay.
They are recorded, and take in mind that sometimes the presentations, this is in my case, for example, probably in other colleagues, they have to do with research that hasn't been published yet.
Okay.
So it's a bit tricky to send out unpublished data, especially when you're part of a research team.
Institution. Okay.
It doesn't mean that on a friendly basis we cannot communicate.
Fantastic, thank you. And I just want to share one thing that covers pretty much most of what you've done. I'm a recovering drug addict and an alcoholic, 13 years clean and sober. And for 10 years, I've done a lot of mindfulness practices, 12-step spiritual work, so on and so forth. And 2.5 years ago, I found the plant medicine, especially ayahuasca, through the Santo Daime, and also the toad medicines, and the type of healing, the quality of healing and resolution to deeper traumas I suffered as a child growing up, the way I felt about myself through my life as a using addict and alcoholic, and opportunities missed and things I've done, through the medicine was substantial. And the healing, and all of you know this, but I just want to restate this for the researchers, for the people that work with the medicine, that the healing is profound. And I've taken this healing and now I practice it as a guide and a counselor and a coach to help others do the same. So I'm very grateful for what you presented because it reinforces what I've experienced in my life. Thank you.
Yes.
According to the audience. The question is if there's been any research on ayahuasca and microdosing.
So, Mike, hello. Congratulations for the presentations of all of you. I'm Paula from Portugal, and my question goes to Marc about the manual. I'm interested to know how it was the cooperation with the public health institution of Catalonia regarding to the production of the manual. How was the process? Which I think it's very important, by the way.
Well, this has been an ongoing process. Since 2010, there's already been a relationship with the health department in Catalonia, and there's also been a degree of luck because the guy that is running that department has been stable through all different governments. So he's been there for many, many years, and we've been able to develop this ongoing relationship with him. One of our deputy director, Oscar Pares, had actually worked for the health department in the past, so he had a personal relationship with Joan Colom, which is the director, and through that we've been able to build this relationship in which they consider us a referent in terms of knowledge around these plant-based psychoactive substances. So it's I'd say that it's been an easy kind of relationship. It's not like super close that we're working together all the time, but there is communication in a regular basis. So it's easy. They didn't make a lot of problems of bringing these conferences about this project at their department, and they were actually very happy, and they distributed that around the workers in the department, and many of the people that work there, they came to this conference. So that was also a big success for us, getting public that usually doesn't come to these kind of events, health professionals that they are not used to hear about these kind of topics, to hear it in a place that it looks respectable, like it's the health department, so what they say must be serious. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Do you have? Oh, there's one there.
Sí. Hola.
Hello, I can only speak Spanish, sorry. Okay. So just something to bear in mind for the building of the protocols, and this has to do with the question by my Polish colleague. It is about the gender perspective, and I really believe the gender perspective should be taken seriously in a very clear way. in two different ways. One regarding the participation of and the action of women as officiating the ritual ceremonies of ayahuasca, because so far the role of the role of women was denied in many traditional cultures, and it has been sent to the background, not to the foreground. So there needs to be a visibilization of women, what they can get to do, and this should be a fundamental part of building this best practice protocols. And then on the other hand, with the expansion of the use and abuse of substances, and particularly ayahuasca, there's also been an increase of abusers and sexual predators, and this cannot be hidden or denied, and it has to be clearly expressed in best practice guides. So the risks people take, not because of bad practices and scams, and also risks to health, to mental health and physical health, but also the risk by women of sexual abuse, because there's tons of cases, not just in Brazil, Peru, Colombia, so the countries around the Amazon, but also in Europe. And we shouldn't conceal that, we shouldn't hide that or look the other way, because it is an actual concern, it is a real concern, and it is growing, and we have to stop it. No more sexual abuse in ayahuasca taking ceremonies. Thank you.
Ines, you have a question? Oh? Claro, you can say it. Okay. All right. I think that's it for now. Do you have a question or not? So please, the microphone. Yes. Sorry. Não tô entendendo nada.
Thank you. I am just curious. I would like to ask you, Mina. You said that you used ayahuasca sometimes in the ceremonies. You also drink. And it is quite a personal question. It is not mandatory to answer, of course. But do you have the need of integrate your own experience as an integration therapist to other therapists?
You think you ask him if I ever had the need for integration? Yeah, I had. It was on my second ceremony, time I drank ayahuasca. I wasn't really working there yet, but I was there solely as a participant, and it was a very difficult experience for me. I didn't really get any help from any therapist for a year because I didn't want to share this. I was managing totally well in my life, but it was quite hard. But the experience was about sensing the world to be hostile and not getting help for anyone. You're alone in the world, no one will help you. So that was obvious why I didn't reach for help. It was part of the experience. So after a year, I went to a therapy session to integrate it, and it was really helpful for me. I went to a brain spotting therapist because at the time I was already a brain spotting practitioner and I was going to therapy, and this is where I personally experienced the combining of these two methods, and I saw in myself that it really helped me. So that's why I started using it also myself more. So I had one of these experiences, and maybe I will have some more. I don't know. I hope not.
Hola, buenas, ¿qué tal? Yo quería...
Hi, I wanted to ask whether you've ever had in integration therapy, whether you have to establish a difference between people who in an ayahuasca ceremony might perceive in the ceremony that they've had some kind of abuse or trauma, and sometimes it's not, you don't know whether it's real, they've had a trauma or they've been abused, or whether it is a situation where you just feel it. I find it difficult sometimes to establish that difference. So what can you do in those cases? We hear another translation.
Not there before, so there's this doubt of, is this real or is this not real? How do you approach that in therapy, or how do you discern one thing or the other? Do you want to comment on that?
I think there are two things that we have to consider here. One is that if the experience is perceived as real for the person, it's not really necessary to know if it really happened or not. You know, if a person comes into a contact of, if some very traumatic memory of abuse, for example, emerges during a session, and the person doesn't have any opportunity to check if this really happened or not, it's not really that important, because in their inside world it happened and it's real for them. So usually it's not very useful to go if it really happened or not or whatever, especially if there is no option to check it, you know. But the other thing we have to consider is the legal part, because if there was some abuse going on and the abuser probably is still alive and have maybe other children or whatever, there is a legal part of it that we have to consider, because this is an event that has to be also reported sometimes. I mean, there are different laws, but so there is also a problem of this, you know. For example, I'm working with a girl now who was included in a forced prostitution ring, and she's not an ayahuasca user. She just came to therapy, and it's not really clear if this thing really happened or not, because she's really traumatized, and she cannot go to police to talk to the policeman, because once that she wanted to report it, she totally fell apart. So now we're working on her telling this and things like that. So with her, it's no proof that it really happened. It's a really film story, you know, of what she's talking about. But if it really happened, it's really necessary for her to report it as soon as possible, because it's still happening. But from her perspective, it can easily be this story of hers can easily be seen in the light of her early childhood abuse by a father who abused her. So maybe she internalized it in a way, you know, to just externalize this on the other person. So we really don't know if it's true or not with her, but with her it's another thing, that if it's true, it's really important for her to report it as soon as possible. So I want to say that sometimes for the person undergoing this difficult experience, it's not very helpful, you know, to search if it's true, if it's not true, did you just imagine it or not? For her, it was really true. So if people come into contact with traumatic memories of abuse or whatever from the past, it's true, it happened in their brain. So maybe it literally didn't happen, the rape or whatever, but there was some other form of abuse that was presented to them, you know, in altered states of consciousness in this more literal way.
Which is very similar to what you just shared, so thank you for that. A lot of the conflict can come not only because of the memory that has appeared, but also because of the implications that has. So if this has happened, then that sets you in a certain direction, and you need to do certain things. It has not happened, that's another case scenario. But the thing is that the person cannot decide, and that's where the conflict is. And both situations, as Peter was saying, it's a lose-lose situation. If that is a real memory, then your family, your father, whatever, was an abuser, you become a victim of an abuse, and that makes you become someone that you were not. But if that has not happened, the situation is not much better either, because your mind is creating a situation in which your father is abusing you. So then what kind of sick person I am that I can create these imaginations, you know? So then the issue is not deciding for one of the options, is to work on this conflict, you know? And as it was mentioned, before jumping into any action, going to police or whatever, first one needs to work with the subjective reality. You know, Claudio Naranjo talks about it in the Healing Journey book, that it really doesn't matter, that's an internal reality. So you work with that internal reality until it's not so emotionally charged, and then people can take better decisions. Usually people in these situations, it's not like a black or white thing. They don't, so the end of therapy is not deciding yes or no. It's like, I think that 70% it's a fantasy created by Ayahuasca and 30% could be real. You know, to find some kind of balance in which the person can continue doing their work. Yeah.
Well, I would like to thank the speakers. We have come to the end of the session. If you would please come back at 3:30 when we'll have the tribute to the elders of Ayahuasca in Spain. Thank you very much.
Thank you.